2026 is just around the corner. History suggests it should be a good cycle for Democrats, at least relative to the disaster that was 2024. In that year, Republicans not only took back the White House, but also flipped the Senate, securing a 53-seat majority. The sitting president's party, Donald Trump's Republicans in this case, almost always loses seats in Congress, especially in the midterm directly after taking office. However, the Republicans once again hold a fundamental advantage on the Senate map. Of the 33 seats up for election in November 2026, plus 2 special elections, 22 are held by Republicans compared to just 13 by Democrats. Despite this, Democrats face significant challenges in key states. 2 seats are being defended by Democrats in states won by Donald Trump in 2024, both by less than 3 percentage points. These are Michigan, where the incumbent is Gary Peters, and Georgia, represented by Jon Ossoff. Additionally, 5 Democratic senators represent states won by Kamala Harris in 2024 by single-digit margins. These include Jeanne Shaheen in New Hampshire, Tina Smith in Minnesota, Mark Warner in Virginia, Cory Booker in New Jersey, and Ben Ray Lujan in New Mexico. Meanwhile, there's just one Republican incumbent defending a seat in a state won by Harris in 2024, Maine's Susan Collins, who secured her 5th term back in 2020. Lastly, Republican Senator Thom Tillis of North Carolina is up for re-election in a state Trump won by a single-digit margin. Tillis notably defeated Kay Hagan, the last Democrat to win a Senate race in North Carolina back in 2014. As always, there are plenty of safe seats that neither party will truly have to worry about, barring a major scandal or a massive political shift unlike anything we've seen in the last 2 decades. One thing we do know about American politics today is that the map has remained relatively stagnant from cycle to cycle and is almost always highly competitive. For Democrats, there's little reason to worry about Oregon, where incumbent Jeff Merkley is seeking a 4th term. Merkley won his last 2 races by more than 15 points. I also expect John Hickenlooper to comfortably win re-election to a 2nd term in Colorado, which he has said will be his last in the Senate. Hickenlooper was first elected in 2018 after serving 2 terms as governor. Kamala Harris carried Colorado by a solid 11-point margin in 2024, and again, 2026 is shaping up to be a better national environment for Democrats. Illinois is a bit of a question mark. We don't yet know if Senate Whip Dick Durbin will seek a 6th term. If he does, Illinois would be a safe Democratic hold. Even if he doesn't, it would still be a long shot for Republicans to flip this seat in an unfavorable environment. While Illinois is trending right, the pace of change isn't fast enough to flip the state in less than 2 years. Finally, in the Northeast, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Jersey, and Delaware are all considered safe blue, as the Democratic incumbents in these states are running for re-election. The only possible exception is Ed Markey in Massachusetts, though even that isn't a real concern given Massachusetts' status as one of the bluest states in the nation. For Republicans, they have a significant number of safe states, including Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, South Dakota, Kansas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, and South Carolina. The Republican incumbents in these states are expected to run for re-election, and even if they don't, the strong partisan lean of each state should easily overcome even a well-funded Democratic challenger. There's an outside chance we see closer races in Kansas and South Carolina, though with the news that Kansas's Democratic governor, Laura Kelly, is absolutely not running for another political office. The incumbent Republican, Roger Marshall, should win easily. Lindsey Graham should also have a smoother path to re-election than back in 2020. That leaves 14 states without a rating. Republicans now hold an advantage with 45 seats to the Democrats' 41. Each of the remaining states are either expected to be closely contested by the challenging party, or there is a substantial degree of uncertainty regarding one party's ability to hold the seat. Let's go from east to west, starting in the last frontier state of Alaska. This race is more about uncertainty than about Democrats having a real shot. Incumbent Republican Dan Sullivan is likely to seek a third term, and while he's the heavy favorite, Alaska's unique top two primary and ranked choice voting system leads me to place it in the likely Republican column for now. If ousted House Democrat Mary Peltola decides to run against Sullivan, it could possibly inch toward lean Republican, whereas if she does not, it'll probably become safe. In New Mexico, one of 5 seats Democrats are defending in states Kamala Harris won by single digits in November. Incumbent Democrat Ben Ray Lujan should hold his seat. Ironically, the fact that he's not a well-known figure might actually help him here. Plus, Republicans don't have a strong candidate lined up to truly contest the seat. In Texas, the state once again teased Democrats before slapping them in the face this past November, with Trump carrying it by nearly 14 points. Texas saw the 6th largest Republican swing between 2020 and 2024, making this a relatively easy hold for 4-term incumbent Republican John Cornyn. However, things could get interesting if Cornyn is primaried by someone like Attorney General Ken Paxton. Up in Nebraska, the 2024 cycle's biggest surprise, incumbent Republican Pete Ricketts, is running for his first full term in the Senate. He's not particularly popular, even among Republicans, and there's a chance Dan Osborne could launch another independent campaign after coming within 7 points of unseating Deb Fischer in November. For now, though, this race stays in the likely Republican column. In Iowa, Republican Joni Ernst plans to run for a third term, though she might face a primary challenge over her refusal to commit to supporting Pete Hegseth for Secretary of Defense. That uncertainty is enough to keep Iowa in the likely Republican column for now. Up in Minnesota, Democrat Tina Smith is expected to seek a second term. She won her first election in 2018 by about 10 points. Similar to New Mexico, Republicans don't have any major candidates lined up to pose a serious threat here. Sticking in the Great Lakes region, let's head to Michigan. 2-term Democrat Gary Peters survived a tight contest back in 2020, defeating John James by less than 2 points, an underperformance compared to Joe Biden's concurrent 3-point win in the presidential race. In November, Trump flipped Michigan over Harris, while Democrat Alyssa Slotkin narrowly won the state's Senate race by less than half a point. No major Republican has publicly suggested they're considering a challenge to Peters yet, but the party will certainly target this seat heavily, especially if they can field a strong candidate. For now, I have it leaning blue. Down in Ohio, we're looking at a special election to fill the remainder of the Senate term vacated by Vice President-elect J.D. Vance. Republican Governor Mike DeWine is expected to appoint Lieutenant Governor John Husted to replace Vance soon after Inauguration Day. Husted will likely run as an unelected incumbent in November 2026. Former Congressman Tim Ryan has expressed interest in running for the seat. Remember, he lost to Vance back in 2022. There's also potential for newly ousted Senator Sherrod Brown to make a comeback bid after losing his 4th-term race by about 3.5 points to Republican Bernie Moreno. Considering Husted's status as a relatively mainstream Republican and Ohio's strong Republican lean, he's likely the heavy favorite to hold the seat. Democrats' best chance would be with Sherrod Brown as their nominee, which could possibly make this race inch closer to a toss-up. With Tim Ryan, also a strong candidate for what it's worth, the race hovers on the edge of lean and likely Republican for now. With that, Republicans are already projected to secure 50 seats, enough to hold their majority with J.D. Vance casting the tie-breaking vote as vice president. Now let's go to Virginia. Incumbent Democrat Mark Warner is favored for re-election with one key caveat. If Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin is persuaded to run against him, the race would move to lean Democratic. Without Youngkin, it's unlikely to safe Democratic territory. Down the southeast coast, we arrive at the 2 highest profile races of the cycle, North Carolina and Georgia. I have a feeling we'll look back on the 2026 cycle and judge which party came out on top based on the outcomes of these 2 races. If Democrats can flip the North Carolina seat and hold Georgia, it will likely coincide with flipping the House, setting them up nicely for 2028. On the other hand, if Republicans hold North Carolina and flip Georgia, it would mark yet another disappointing cycle for the Democrats. In North Carolina, Republican Thom Tillis is expected to seek a third term, though not without facing a primary challenge. The North Carolina Republican Party censured Tillis for his bipartisan support on gun control and same-sex marriage, and Lara Trump is widely seen as a potential challenger. In fact, she led Tillis in an early hypothetical Republican primary poll. However, both Tillis and Trump trail a potential Democratic nominee, popular outgoing Governor Roy Cooper. Cooper's potential candidacy has even made Democrats the favorites in the 2026 North Carolina Senate race, according to Kalshi's prediction markets. If the race comes down to Tillis versus Cooper, it would likely be extremely close, a true 50-50 toss-up. If Lara Trump is the Republican nominee, I would peg her as a slight underdog. Prediction markets currently favor Tillis to survive the primary, so I'm marking this race as a pure toss-up for now. Of course, if Cooper surprises everyone and decides not to run, then either Republican would be favored. In Georgia, incumbent Democrat Jon Ossoff is running for a second term. He was first narrowly elected in the high-profile Georgia runoffs back in 2021, which gave Democrats a Senate majority at the time. Outgoing Governor Brian Kemp, who will be term limited in 2026, is widely seen as the frontrunner for the Republican nomination. Kemp would be the strongest candidate Republicans could field for this race, and Kalshi gives him about a 65% chance of securing the nomination. The governor's potential candidacy is why most analysts consider Ossoff the most vulnerable Democratic incumbent in 2026. That said, Georgia saw one of the smallest pro-Republican shifts in the 2024 election, as did North Carolina. Both states are experiencing slow but steady demographic shifts trending in favor of Democrats, unlike other competitive states. Still, Kemp's strength as a candidate likely outweighs Ossoff's incumbency advantage. I have this race as a toss-up, with the outcome depending heavily on the national environment. Anything short of a strong Democratic wave would likely give Kemp the edge. On a related note, Democrats' chances in Florida these days depend entirely on a big blue wave. While competitive statewide elections aren't too far in the past, Florida has shifted further to the right over the last decade than any other state in the nation. So unless Governor Ron DeSantis appoints someone particularly controversial to replace Marco Rubio following his expected confirmation as Secretary of State, Republicans are likely to hold this seat comfortably. That leaves our two northeastern states, which could make more headlines in 2026 than they usually do, as both races might be among the closest and costliest in the nation. In New Hampshire, incumbent Democrat Jeanne Shaheen is seeking to hold the seat she's held since 2008. She was last reelected by 16 points in 2020 against a weak opponent. This time, however, Shaheen might face Scott Brown, the former U.S. Senator from Massachusetts, whom she narrowly defeated by just 3 points in 2014. Still, this is a race that Democrats should certainly expect to hold in a favorable national environment. Even Kamala Harris carried New Hampshire by 3 points at the presidential level this past November. For now, I have it leaning blue. The truly fascinating race here in the Northeast is in Maine. Incumbent Republican Senator Susan Collins is a political unicorn. In 2020, despite almost all polls and analysts predicting she would lose, Collins surprised everyone by defeating Democratic nominee Sarah Gideon by about 8 percentage points. This was on the same ballot where Joe Biden carried Maine by about 9 points. Collins remains the only Republican to win in a state simultaneously carried by the Democratic presidential nominee since 2004, and so, as the only Republican-held seat up in a state that voted for Kamala Harris in 2024, and given Collins's record of overperformance despite Maine's Democratic lean, Maine is considered a key Senate battleground in 2026. The prediction market Kalshi currently gives Democrats a slight edge to unseat Collins, with a 53% chance, still effectively making this a toss-up. Democrats' strongest potential candidate would likely be Congressman Jared Golden, who has consistently won re-election in Maine's northern, more conservative, rural 2nd District. a district Donald Trump has carried in 3 straight presidential elections. However, Golden is more likely to run for the open governor's seat. If he does, Collins would have at least a 50-50 shot at re-election. This is one of those cases where candidates truly matter. If Golden does run as the Democratic nominee, I'd probably place this race in the tilt to lean blue column. For now, though, it remains a toss-up, joining North Carolina and Georgia. So this brings us to a 51 to 46 seat split favoring Republicans, with the 3 toss-ups determining which party comes away from the 2026 cycle feeling good about their electoral prospects moving forward. At this point, I'd estimate Republicans have at least an 80 to 90% chance of holding the chamber in 2026. That said, Democrats will want to do everything they can to position themselves for 2028 and beyond. Winning these 3 toss-ups would go a long way toward that goal. As always, feel free to share your thoughts on this map in the comments and suggest any other videos or topics you'd like me to cover. That does it for today's video. Shout out to my channel members listed in the description below. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like if you enjoyed the video. Check out more of my content here, and as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. EP out.